Yo-yos.
Enough said.
Let's talk about that.
What is a yo-yo? A yo-yo is a toy that is made up of a pair of discs connected by an axle in the middle. It has a string looped around its axle, which allows a yo-yo to spin up and down as the string winds and rewinds. The sources of energy involved in a yo-yo's motion are potential energy and kinetic energy. Potential energy is when the yo-yo is held in your hand with a string wound around its axle. The yo-yo has potential energy because the string looped around the axle allows it to store energy. When you release a yo-yo, the potential energy is gradually converted to kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is described by the yo-yo's motion. There are two types of kinetic energy involved. The first is when the yo-yo moves up and down, and then the second is when the yo-yo rotates and spins. The spinning of the yo-yo is what causes the object to fall differently than the other objects. Although gravity acts on the yo-yo, it falls much more slowly because potential energy is being used to spin the yo-yo as well. Inertia. According to inertia, a yo-yo would continue to stay in its constant motion of falling and rising. However, there are forces involved that cause the yo-yo's motion to come to a rest. Friction is an example. Friction occurs between the axle and the string. As the string moves up and down the axle, the rubbing motion against each other occurs, which uses some of the energy. Moreover, there is air resistance that rubs against a yo-yo and uses some energy as well. This is where Newton's first law comes into place. In order to keep the yo-yo running, an outside force must be applied. What we do is we apply a slight tug to the string as it reaches the end. What happens is that as the string is unwinding, the axle is moving along with it. The tug increases the friction between the axle and string and causes the string to wrap around the other way and come back up. This gives the yo-yo some additional energy which was lost during friction. Also, just like any other object on Earth that has mass, the force of gravity pulls the object towards the surface at an acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared. Tension is an important force in a yo-yo's motion. Tension is a force that is transferred by the yo-yo string when it's pulled. I'll be focusing on how this tension changes as the yo-yo's motion changes. When the yo-yo is held in our hands before we let it go, the yo-yo experiences a normal force and a gravitational force. The hand applies a normal force upwards and the earth applies a gravitational force downwards. These two forces balance each other out, which is why the yo-yo's motion is at rest in your hands. When we allow the yo-yo to fall from our hands, the string around the yo-yo winds as it falls down. This is because the force of gravity and tension is unbalanced. The force of gravity, pulling the yo-yo downwards, is greater than the force of tension pulling it upwards. This means that the net force horizontally is the force of gravity, which eventually pulls the yo-yo downwards. When the yo-yo is at its lowest position, the yo-yo is at a momentary rest before we tug it upwards. At the slight moment when the yo-yo is at rest, the force of tension and the force of gravity are balanced. This causes the object to stay at rest at the bottom. When we apply a slight tug to the string, the force of tension and gravity become unbalanced again. The force of tension increases with the tug. Now, the force of tension pulling the yo-yo upwards is greater than the force of the gravity pulling it downwards. The net force horizontally is now the force of the tension pulling the yo-yo upwards. This causes the yo-yo to rewind back up as it accelerates. And that's how a yo-yo is able to yo.